It is such an honor to be here introducing my friend and my hero, Arundhati Roy, especially to be here in support of her magnificent new novel, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness. I have missed Arundhati a lot over the past few years. It's been a long time, but when I saw Arundhati yesterday, I told her that I couldn't honestly say that I had missed her recently, because over the past few days, as I read her book, I felt that I had been with her, inside her head, her dreams, her nightmares. Any novel is a kind of visit with its author, of course, but there is an intimacy and also an intricacy to this book that makes this feel especially true. It is just so exquisitely Roy, in its humor, humanity, and honesty, that reading Ministry cannot help but feel like surrendering to an expansive and mind-bending and generous visit with an old friend, whether you are blessed to know Arundhati personally or not. In truth, the happiest moments I've spent in what feels like too long have been the hours I've stolen in the sunshine, mostly on park benches, devouring this book. Which is not to say that it is a happy book. It's a book about the truth of the world, so its characters are lashed by violence, ethnic, religious, gender, caste, and class-based, or some combination of all of the above. But if it isn't a happy book, it is an intensely loving one. Love suffuses its construction, its every word. And I found myself remembering that Arundhati is a trained architect. Unlike most of us, she knows how to build things. And she has built for us not simply a story, but a world. The Ministry of Utmost Happiness is already soaring to the tops of bestseller lists around the world where it rightfully belongs. The reviews have been ecstatic, as well they should be. And I want to quote here from one of my favorites in the Boston Globe. They wrote, "Fearless, staggeringly beautiful, a fierce, fabulously disobedient novel." And if I could just pause and say, fabulously disobedient is maybe one of the best descriptions of Arundhati. So fully realized, it feels intimate yet vibrates with the tragicomedy of myth. Roy is writing at the height of her powers. Once a decade, if we are lucky, a novel emerges from the cinder pit of living that asks the urgent question of our global era. Roy's novel is this decade's ecstatic and necessary answer. Now, since I'm introducing a person, not just a book, I suppose I should cover some basic biographic details. Arundhati Roy lives in Delhi. She grew up in Kerala, where her mother ran a school. She did study architecture, worked in film, was a rebel and a bohemian, and still is. Her first novel, God of Small Things, took the literary world by storm. It sold millions of copies, was translated into more than 40 languages, and won the Booker Prize in 1997. I believe most of you know what happened next, that after winning the Booker, Roy announced that she would not be writing another novel in the foreseeable future. Instead, she became a kind of self-assigning war correspondent, seeking out the places of maximum pain, maximum injustice, maximum state violence, reporting from Kashmir on the Maoist insurgency, on the Gujarat massacre, trying to defend the Narmada Valley from drowning. But she did not write about these struggles like a war reporter. She wrote about them like a novelist. She packed her tremendous gifts as a writer, her bottomless capacity for empathy, her devastating eye for detail, for the perfect, unforgettable metaphor, her humor, her eye for the absurd. Arundhati, I feel, writes in the tradition of the late, great Eduardo Galeano, who was very important to both Arundhati and I. He once explained that he was not bothered by those who wanted him to decide whether he was a historian, a poet, a short story writer, or a journalist. He said, "I do not believe in the frontiers that, according to literature's customs officers, separate the forms." And Arundhati, as we know, respects no borders, literary or otherwise. For the past 20 years, she has put her tremendous gifts at the service of movements fighting for justice and survival. So many struggles were better understood, more deeply felt, because Arundhati chose to help us see through her artist's eyes. But let us make no mistake, Roy is not Mother Teresa. She does not just bring comfort to the afflicted, she afflicts the comfortable at every turn. She names names, she takes no prisoners, she makes no apologies, which is precisely why she keeps ending up in court and briefly in jail for contempt. One court proceeding kept referring to her as that woman, which is why for a time Arundhati referred to herself as the hooker who won the Booker. It is telling that in the acknowledgments for this novel, a novel, Roy thanks not just loved ones and colleagues, but a team, a small army of lawyers who, she writes, have kept me out of prison for now. All of this troublemaking can seem hard to reconcile with the image of Arundhati in the press, where journalists often dwell on her beauty and poise. But Roy has long described herself in less precious terms. She calls herself a hooligan. I didn't believe it until I met her, but it is true. She is a natural anti-authoritarian, not only in theory, but also in practice, constitutionally incapable of bowing to authority. Many reviewers of the Ministry of Utmost Happiness have observed that it is well worth the wait, as if Arundhati has been twiddling her thumbs for 20 years, waiting for inspiration to strike. And that is so far from the truth. She has been doing what writers do. She has been learning and growing and always writing. Her brilliant nonfiction essays have been collected in multiple books, each of them indispensable: The Algebra of Infinite Justice, Listening to Grasshoppers, Broke Republic, Capitalism, A Ghost Story, and Things That Can and Cannot Be Said. Of course, it is true that this political work has taken her away from fiction, and she was missed. But those experiences, far from distractions, have also clearly made her an even more transcendent novelist. Just as Roy brought her writerly gifts to so many struggles and movements, so does her time spent on those many front lines, living with freedom fighters and land defenders, now enrich her storytelling, bringing urgency and hunger and fire to each page of this world-shaking novel. So, Arundhati, we missed you, and Arundhati, we never lost you. Please join me in welcoming the one and only hoodlum with a magic pen, Arundhati Roy.